Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Gursheen Galan and you're watching Firstpost. In the next few minutes, I get you the top 40 updates from around the world, only here on Fast and Factual. Let's get started. First, let's get you caught up on the big updates coming in from West Asia. Israel launches strikes across multiple cities in Iran, targeting the heart of country's nuclear program. Israeli military says 200 warplanes dropped hundreds of bombs across Iran, striking over 100 targets. Global nuclear watchdog confirms Iran's main nuclear site, Natanz, has been hit in Israeli attack. Israeli army releases video of its strikes on Iran. The video shows Israeli Air Force jets taking off before launching its wide-scale strikes. The Israeli military says that its strikes were guided by precise intelligence. The Israeli strikes killed Chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards or IRGC Hossein Salami. Revolutionary Guards is a powerful branch of Iran's armed forces. The Israeli attack also kills Iran's Chief of Armed Forces Mohammad Bagheri. The Iranian state media confirms armed forces chief's killing. Iranian state media confirms that Israeli attack has killed at least 6 nuclear scientists. They include top brains behind Tehran's uranium enrichment and nuclear research programs. Iranian state media shows videos of buildings torched and damaged in the Israeli attack in Tehran. Smoke engulfs Iranian capital sky as several explosions also rock Tehran after the Israeli attack. Iran is retaliating after the Israeli attack. Tehran launches over 100 drones towards Israel. Israel Defense Forces say they were working to shoot down Iranian drones. Israeli strikes on Iran empties Iranian airspace. Aviation tracking site Flight Radar 24's data shows air traffic avoiding Israeli and Iranian airspace. This after Israel targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, ballistic missile factories and military commanders. Iran's armed forces say there are no limits to their response to Israeli strikes, adding that the Israeli terrorist regime, which occupies Al-Quds, has crossed all red lines. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issues a stern warning to Israel, saying that it would suffer severe consequences. He threatens of a bitter and painful fate for Israel. After the killing of Iran's Chief of Armed Forces Mohammad Bagheri, the country's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei appoints Rear Admiral Habibullah Sayyari as interim chief. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hails the country's Operation Rising Lion, adding that it targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. Netanyahu says the operation will continue for as many days as it takes. Israel declares a state of emergency, asking its citizens to stay close to shelters. Authorities shut Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport. The alert issued in anticipation of Iranian retaliatory strikes was later retracted. Iran's permanent mission to the UN writes a letter condemning the Israeli attacks and urging the Security Council to convene urgently to address the violations of Iranian sovereignty. Tehran further vows to proportionately respond to the attacks. Iran says the United States would be responsible for the consequences of the deadly Israeli attack. Iran says that Israel's aggressive actions could not have been carried out without the coordination and permission of the United States. Trump says Iran can't have nuclear weapons. US President Donald Trump says Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. Trump says he was aware of Israel's attack beforehand. However, he clarifies that the US was not involved in Israeli attack. Meanwhile, US State Secretary Marco Rubio warns Iran against attacking American forces in the region. Iran announces on state television it will not participate in nuclear negotiations with the United States until further notice. Meanwhile, the United States says it's still open to talks with Iran over its nuclear program. The US-Iran nuclear talks were previously scheduled to be held on June 15th. Iran-backed Hamas says that Israeli strikes could destabilize the region, adding that Iran is paying the price of backing Palestine and its resistance. Meanwhile, Houthis say that Iran has the right to defend itself and develop its nuclear program after Houthi strike. Oman condemns Israeli attack on Iran, calling it dangerous escalation. Oman calls on the international community to put an end to this dangerous approach, threatens diplomatic solutions. Oman has been mediating US-Iran nuclear talks. Saudi Arabia calls out alleged blatant Israeli aggression, saying that it violates international laws. Meanwhile, Turkey urges Israel to stop its alleged aggressive actions, criticizing the Netanyahu government for not being willing to resolve issues through diplomatic means. Jordan military says it has intercepted drones and missiles that violated its airspace after Iran's retaliation. This comes after Jordan closed its airspace amid high tensions in West Asia, saying that it would not allow its airspace to be violated. Israeli strikes impact flight operations in West Asia. Gulf Airlines cancels flights as nations shut airspace. Emirates Airline cancels flights to and from Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon and Iran. Qatar Airways also temporarily cancels flights to Iran and Iraq amid concerns over potential escalation. World leaders are reacting to Israeli strikes in Iran. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says stability in the region must be the priority, calling for restraint, calm and a return to diplomacy. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz urges both Israel and Iran to avoid any further escalation. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says this was a unilateral action by Israel and calls for de-escalation. In more global reactions coming in, Australian Foreign Minister calls on all parties to refrain from actions that could further exacerbate tensions. New Zealand Prime Minister warns against the risk of miscalculation, adding that the region does not need any more military action. Meanwhile, Japanese Foreign Minister strongly condemns the action that could escalate the situation. India says it is closely monitoring the evolving situation and urges both sides to avoid any escalatory steps. New Delhi calls for dialogue and diplomacy for de-escalation of the situation. India also issues advisory for its nationals in the region to exercise caution and follow local security norms. Meanwhile, China expresses deep concerns over Israel's strike on Iran, adding that it opposes violations of Iranian sovereignty. Pakistan also condemns the alleged unjustified Israeli strikes on Iran, warning the Israeli strikes were a serious threat to the peace, security and stability of the region. Now bringing you the latest from India, at least 268 people have died in a tragic plane crash in Gujarat's Ahmedabad on Thursday. The Air India plane en route to London's Gatwick carried 242 people on board, including the crew. The mishap occurred just minutes after the takeoff on AI-171 in the Meghani area and crashed on the mess of BJ Medical College, where 10 other people also died. A CCTV footage captured the moment an Air India passenger plane crashed right after takeoff in Ahmedabad. The plane fell on a hostel while the students were having their lunch. Meanwhile, the National Security Guard has also taken the possession of the black box for further investigation. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived at Ahmedabad city a day after the Air India flight crash. At least 265 people have lost their lives in the tragic incident. Prime Minister Modi visited the plane crash site and assessed the ground situation. He also visited the Ahmedabad Civil Hospital to meet those injured in the crash. Union Home Minister Amit Shah met the lone survivor of Air India plane crash. He also met other people who received injuries in the tragic incident. Shah also held meeting with Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel to take stock of the situation. He also visited the site of the crash. Directorate General of Civil Aviation held urgent meeting with Air India after the crash of its plane. It has directed the air carrier to submit the health report of all its aircrafts. Meanwhile, Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has also begun a probe into the incident. Now moving to other top updates. A Phuket to Delhi Air India flight makes an emergency landing after a bomb threat. The plane carrying 156 passengers returns to Thailand. This comes a day after an Air India plane crashed in India's Ahmedabad, killing 265 people. India says it has agreed with neighbour China to expedite the process to resume direct flights between them in a sign of further improvement in ties. However, no timeline has been given as of now. The decision comes as India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri welcomed Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong in India. Direct flights between India and China were halted after the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2020 deadly border clashes in the Galvan Valley. Japan's defense minister says it is unacceptable for China to blame Japan for close encounters between their military planes over the Pacific high seas last weekend. Japan says recent Chinese military activities in the Pacific, where Beijing's two operating aircraft carriers were sighted simultaneously for the first time, reveal Beijing's intent to improve operational capacity in the area. Cambodia orders troops to stay on full alert and bans Thai dramas on television as the ongoing border dispute between the two Southeast Asian neighbours escalates. Cambodia also shut off internet connections routed through Thailand. This as two sides prepare for a meeting to diffuse tensions following deadly clashes last month. Anti-immigration riots continue to persist in Northern Ireland. Protests that started from Ballymena have spread to the town of Portadown, only a few miles from the capital Belfast. The rioters attacked police with petrol bombs, rocks and fireworks, and debris was spewed across streets and bins were set on fire. So far, the police has closed down roads and mobilized armored vans in Portadown. Violence first flared on Monday after two 14-year-old Romanian boys were charged for alleged sexual assault of a teenage girl. On to business and tech news now. Asian stock markets dived led by a sell-off in US futures after Israel conducted a military strike on Iran, sending investors scurrying to safe havens such as gold and the Swiss franc. Japan's Nikkei lost 1.4% earlier today, while South Korea's Kospi fell 1.2%. Meanwhile, US S&P E-mini futures slumped 1.5% and Nasdaq futures skid 1.7%. Meanwhile, Indian share market also opened lower, tracking declines in other Asian markets. The Nifty 50 was down 1.67% at 24,473 earlier today, and the BSE Sensex slid 1.55% to 80,427.81. Crude oil futures jumped as much as 13% after Israel launched strikes on Iran. US West Texas Intermediate climbed over 11% to $75.82 per barrel, while global benchmark Brent surged over 10% to $76.48 per barrel. In the aftermath of Israel's strikes on Iran, the dollar rallied too, as investors fled to safe haven assets. Against a basket of major currencies, the dollar rose nearly 0.6% as losses mounted for the euro sterling and the Australian dollar in particular. And Boeing and GE Aerospace scaled back public engagements after the Air India crash killed over 250 people in the deadliest aviation disaster in a decade. Boeing's CEO cancelled his trip to next week's Paris Air Show, while GE Aerospace postponed its June 17 investor briefing to focus on supporting investigators in India. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us. I am Gushin Garland and we'll see you right back here next week. Stay informed and stay tuned to Firstpost.